here we are. I couldn't leave the stage just because I'm supposed to talk to Minister Cingolani. That should appear on the screen.
I'm here.
I can hear his voice. Here he is. Good afternoon, Minister Cingolani. We are connected to a global audience, and we were just speaking about health and the idea of One Health, but starting from One Health and going to the planet prosperity goes through the discussion about the ecological transition, which is exactly your task and what you're trying to achieve. So let me just ask you an information, first of all. What could you achieve till now in the G20 as when it comes to fighting the climate change? Is there any real result out there?
Yeah, besides the headache, there's plenty of results. I would say, first of all, this year we had for the first time a G20 getting together environment and energy. That's non-trivial because normally the two issues have been treated as completely separated, which is no longer doesn't make any sense any longer at the moment. It's clear that they have to be treated together. In Naples, when we had the G20, the environmental G20 was concluded successfully, having a communique consisting of 25 points that were shared unanimously by all the participants. In a few words, that was recovering the concept of nature-based solutions applied to many environmental issues, and there was full agreement among all the parties. The second G20 was the energy one. That consisted of approximately 60 resolutions, 60 points. 58 were agreed completely, and 2 were left for the forthcoming G20 of the prime ministers. And there is a specific reason. What was very important in this G20 energy was that all countries, including those traditionally against the transition, shared and agreed about the idea of respecting the Paris Agreement. So just trying to keep below 2 centigrades the temperature rise by the end of the century. But in there we had a difference because some of the countries, the most active countries, were pushing to accelerate during the decade, trying to reach 1.5 as a target and not 2 centigrades. I mean, the difference of half degree centigrade is quite substantial in terms of global atmospheric chemistry and atmospheric composition and impact on the weather. At that time, accelerating too much on this temperature would have meant a lot of social and industrial change, especially for big countries such as China and India with huge populations, and also the policy of the incentives for coal-based or fossil fuel-based activities were questioned. So since this impact was too much social rather than only climatological, we decided to shift those two, to upshift and forward those 2 issues to the G20 of the prime ministers. But yet I would say 25 out of 25 in the environment and 58 out of 60 on the energy was really an unexpected success, primarily because all countries decided, okay, we follow the Paris Agreement. I mean, 1 year before, this would have been a complete dream.
Let me just go for a second out of the already decided pattern and ask you, you're not a politician by life. You spent an entire life as a scientist. What are the difficulties you're finding in these talks that you couldn't even imagine before? Is there anything new? Is there anything that you really couldn't expect?
Well, okay. Due to the very international character of the career of the scientist, I think I had an advantage in talking and working simultaneously with a community of people coming from 20 different countries. So it was very helpful for me, the previous experience of talking many languages and knowing pretty much the attitude, how different people approach problems. So this helps. On the other hand, the drawback is that for a technical education like mine, sometimes it's hard to understand the subtle understatement of the politics. So I tend to be very technical. Sometimes rule 2 + 2 = 4, and I don't see how it can be 4.5 or 3.5. So this sometimes doesn't help. But generally speaking, I think at the international level, there's not such a big problem. I mean, I found the story relatively manageable. I don't say easy, but we could make it.
It's not so easy to listen to someone saying we can make it, talking about climate change. Let me just go back to what is going on in the framework of G20. And this year, there is a clear thread that takes us from G20 to COP26, and it will be Glasgow. Can you see and can you tell us what are the achievements that in some ways are paving the way towards Glasgow?
Yeah. So guys, I have to be very frank. I think one of the most important contributions due to the Italian leadership stands in a totally new way of facing the problem of climate change versus global inequalities. I think we did push a lot over the last months, starting with the G20, insisting on the fact that there's no point to treat separately global inequalities and climate change. I mean, to make it very clear, the G20 deals with 4.8 billion people producing 80% of the greenhouse gases approximately. But we should not forget we're leaving outside of the count 3 billion people producing a marginal amount of greenhouse gas. And out of those 3 billion people, we have about 1 billion people having no access to electricity, and most of the 3 billions having no access to clean fuel for cooking. So even the concept itself of ecological transition changed on whether you consider this, you define this in the G20 country or in any other country outside the G20. That is exactly the COP26. COP26 is embodying more than 190 countries. G20 is 20 countries. So the way we discuss, the way we conceive a plan, the way we develop a strategy for a G20 country, it cannot be similar to the strategy developed for any vulnerable country in the COP26. This is fundamental. How can we talk about electric mobility or hydrogen in a country where there is no electricity available to the citizen? This was, I think everybody knew this, but for the first time ever, this was finally put together. And in the pre-COP work we did in Milan recently, even with the Youth for Climate, and then with the ministerial pre-COP meeting of last week, that appeared very clear. So what do we expect as a message for the COP26? Number one, we all agree about the strategy to decarbonize. We all know that there are tricks we have to develop, just like changing electricity, swapping electricity into renewable, electrifying manufacturing, changing mobility, restoring natural environment for carbon trapping, boosting circular economy, and in general, waste cycle. So we all agree with that. But on the other hand, we should not stop creating funds to reduce the gap with the underdeveloped countries and the vulnerable countries. The G20 promised 100 billions per year to the vulnerable countries. We hardly reached 60 before the COVID. So first of all, we have to reach the 100 billion. This is really the minimum. It's the sort of metabolic support. And we all know, everybody agreed during the ministerial and the pre-COP last week that the 100 billions should act like a leverage to reach the trillion financial aid, which is actually needed by the vulnerable countries. So it's a factor of 10 leverage. This can only be accomplished by a proper public-private partnership. The public should put the spark into the fire, and then the private should support and grow the financial aid. Otherwise, we will not reduce the differences. The second issue, I think everybody agrees now. The Chinese government also confirmed that we are all aware that the 2 degrees is too much. The IPCC report has shown that we are already late, so we have to accelerate. This decade is fundamental. We have to keep the concept of 1.5 degrees alive. So increasing the temperature by not more than 1.5. This is an extra effort, it's an extra challenge. We all have to work about this challenge. Those 2 pillars are really fundamental. And then, of course, we talk about adaptation. That has to be faster. We talk about transparency in the nationally disclosed carbon activities that actually We should give transparent number, and the number should be certified if we want to make global statistics about the status of the environment. We should accelerate the Santiago Protocol to help vulnerable countries after catastrophic event. I mean, having a storm in Haiti is totally different than having a storm in Finland. So we should adapt our response time to the actual need and vulnerability of the countries. Those are some of the issues we were preparing at the pre-COP, and I think in Glasgow at the COP26, those things have to become decisions and have to be forwarded to the next COP.
Thank you so much, Minister. Let me put it like this. The entire process has to be sustainable and not just a goal. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We know that you're in a meeting with all the other ministers of the government, so thank you even more for participating to this T20. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minister Cingolani.
Bye-bye.
So, the long day is over, and tomorrow is going to be the last T20 day, and they tell me that the appointment is tomorrow at 2 o'clock Italian time. Everybody else has to calculate what time it's going to be. Have a great evening, and thank you so very much.